the avoidant appears completely unbothered by you. They're calm, detached, seemingly indifferent to whether you're in their life or not. They give minimal responses to your messages. They don't reach out first. They maintain emotional distance that makes it seem like you could disappear tomorrow and they wouldn't even notice or care. But this unbothered exterior is a carefully maintained facade that hides a completely different internal reality. Behind that cool detachment, the avoidant is actually obsessed with you. They think about you constantly, monitor your life from a distance, feel things intensely but can't express them, and are far more attached than their behavior suggests. The unbothered act is their defense mechanism, their way of managing the terrifying vulnerability of caring about someone while protecting themselves from the fear of being hurt, rejected, or controlled. Understanding that their detachment is performance rather than truth helps you stop taking their behavior personally and recognize that you matter far more to them than they can show. Here's exactly what's happening behind the avoidance unbothered facade and why their obsession with you is real even when their behavior suggests they barely care at all. They're monitoring your life from a distance. The avoidant acts unbothered in direct interaction with you, but they're absolutely checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, and staying updated on your life without ever letting you know they're paying attention. They see your posts, your stories, your updates. They know what you're doing, who you're with, how you're feeling based on what you share publicly. They're consuming information about you regularly while maintaining the facade that they're not thinking about you at all. This monitoring is their way of staying connected without the vulnerability of actual contact. The distance monitoring is obsessive in its consistency. The avoidant might check your profiles multiple times a day, even though they haven't messaged you in weeks. They're watching for signs of how you're doing without them, whether you're moving on, if you're seeing someone else, if you seem happy or sad. Every post you make is analyzed for meaning. Every picture is examined for context. They're building a narrative about your life from the pieces you share, and this surveillance is how they maintain connection without having to risk the rejection or vulnerability of reaching out directly. The obsession through distance also includes the avoidant comparing themselves to people in your life. If you post with friends, they wonder if you're closer to those friends than you were to them. If you post looking happy, they feel both relieved you're okay and anxious that you're fine without them. Subscribe for insights into attachment psychology that reveal what's really happening beneath avoidant behavior. If you post anything that could be interpreted as you dating someone new, they spiral with jealousy they'd never admit to feeling. Your life occupies significant mental space for them, even though they act like you're barely a thought in their mind. They replay conversations and moments obsessively. While the avoidant acts unbothered when you're actually interacting, they replay every conversation, every interaction, every moment with you repeatedly in their private thoughts. They analyze what you said, what they said, what it all meant. They think about the good moments and wish they'd been more present. They replay the difficult moments and wish they'd handled them differently. They ruminate on the last time they saw you, what the energy was like, whether you seemed hurt or angry or indifferent. This obsessive mental replay is constant even though they show no signs of it. The mental obsession includes imagining different scenarios with you. The avoidant fantasizes about reaching out, about what they'd say, how you'd respond. They imagine reconciliation scenarios where they're brave enough to be vulnerable. They picture alternate versions of your relationship where they weren't so defended. They think about what life would be like if they could just be different, if they could show up the way you deserved. These imagined alternatives haunt them because they highlight the gap between what they want and what they're capable of giving. The obsessive thinking also includes the avoidant mentally defending themselves and their behavior. They construct explanations for why they acted the way they did. They build cases for why their patterns were necessary or justified. They imagine conversations where they explain themselves to you even though they'd never actually have those conversations. This mental activity is their way of processing feelings they can't express directly, and the sheer amount of mental energy they spend on you proves you're anything but forgotten, even though their behavior suggests they've moved on completely. They feel intense jealousy they can't express. The avoidant acts unbothered about who else might be in your life, but they're actually consumed by jealousy they don't know how to express or even admit to themselves. The thought of you with someone else triggers intense emotional reactions they work hard to suppress. They imagine you giving someone else the attention you gave them, being vulnerable with someone else in ways you tried to be with them, building something with someone else that they couldn't build with you. This jealousy is agonizing, but they can't show it because that would reveal how much they care. The unexpressed jealousy manifests in subtle ways. The avoidant might suddenly reach out when they suspect you're seeing someone else, not to confess feelings, but to check in casually and gauge the situation. They might make comments about relationships or dating in general when they're actually fishing for information about your situation. They might become slightly more responsive or available when they feel threatened by potential competition, even though they'd never articulate what they're doing or why. The jealousy drives behavior they can't consciously acknowledge. The intensity of the jealousy also reveals how attached they actually are. If they were truly unbothered, the idea of you with someone else would be neutral information. But it's not neutral. It's devastating. It triggers all their fears about being replaced, not being enough, losing their option to come back to you someday when they're ready. The jealousy proves they've been far more emotionally invested than their detached behavior suggested, and the fact that they have to hide this jealousy rather than express it shows how defended they are against vulnerability. They're affected by your absence more than they show. When you stop reaching out, when you go quiet, when you implement boundaries or distance, the avoidant acts like they don't notice or care, but internally, they're thrown off completely. Your absence affects their daily functioning in ways they'd never admit. They notice when you don't text. They feel the void when you're not pursuing. They miss your presence even though they were the one creating distance. The loss of your attention and energy in their life is far more impactful than their unbothered facade suggests. The hidden impact of your absence includes the avoidant questioning themselves. They wonder why you stopped reaching out. They question if they pushed too far. They worry that you've genuinely moved on rather than just taking space. These questions create anxiety they don't know how to process because their defensive structure doesn't allow for admitting they care enough to be bothered by your absence. So they suffer silently, pretending everything is fine while internally spiraling about what your silence means. Your absence also forces the avoidant to confront their patterns in ways your presence didn't. When you were there pursuing or available, they could take you for granted while managing distance. But when you're gone, when they can't access you even if they wanted to, they have to face that their patterns cost them something valuable. This confrontation is uncomfortable and often leads to the avoidant eventually reaching out, not because they suddenly became less avoidant, but because your absence became unbearable, even though they're still trying to act like it doesn't affect them when they do reach out. They care about your opinion far more than they admit. The avoidant acts like your opinion of them doesn't matter, like they're fine with however you perceive them. But they actually care deeply about what you think. They wonder if you still respect them despite their patterns. They worry about whether you see them as cold or damaged. They're concerned about their image in your eyes, even though they'd never ask directly what you think of them. Your opinion holds weight that influences their self-perception more than they can acknowledge. This hidden concern about your perception shows up in subtle ways. The avoidant might mention accomplishments or positive things happening in their life when they do interact with you, subtly seeking validation. They might defend themselves or explain their behavior even when you haven't asked for explanation, revealing they're concerned about how you've interpreted their actions. They pay attention to your reactions even when they pretend not to care, and your approval or disappointment affects them significantly, even though they maintain an unbothered exterior. The caring about your opinion also means the avoidant is affected by any criticism or negative feedback from you. If you express hurt about their behavior, even if they don't respond in the moment, they think about it constantly. They feel guilty even though they might defend their patterns. They internalize your perspective as one of the few views that actually penetrates their defenses. This is why avoidants often come back later with apologies or acknowledgement long after the fact, because your words stayed with them even though they acted unbothered when you expressed them. They're scared you'll actually move on. Behind the unbothered act is genuine fear that you'll fully move on and become genuinely unavailable to them. The avoidant has been taking you for granted, assuming you'll always be there as an option they can return to when they're ready. But the thought of you truly moving on with someone else, genuinely being done with them, completely closing the door on any future possibility, terrifies them. This fear is what often motivates their breadcrumbing or occasional reach-outs designed to keep you somewhat attached, even though they're not ready for real relationship. The fear of you moving on includes the avoidant recognizing that what you offered was rare. They know that your patience, your understanding, your willingness to work with their patterns isn't something most people offer. If you genuinely move on, they might never find someone else willing to accommodate their limitations while still calling them forward. The thought of losing their best chance at real relationship, even if they weren't ready to take that chance, is deeply unsettling in ways they can't express. This fear also reveals that the avoidant knows they're the problem. If they were truly unbothered, they wouldn't fear you moving on because they genuinely not want to be with you. But they do want you, or at least want the option of you. They're just too defended to pursue it actively. The fear that you'll remove that option by moving on completely is what makes them obsessed with tracking your life, monitoring for signs of your emotional state, and occasionally reaching out to maintain some level of connection even if minimal. They compare everyone else to you. While acting unbothered, the avoidant is actually comparing every other person they encounter to you, and everyone falls short in specific ways that frustrate them. They meet new people, pursue other options, try to replace what they had with you, but nobody measures up in the ways that actually mattered. Other people might be attractive, but they don't understand the avoidant like you did. They might be available, but they don't have your patience with patterns. They might be interesting, but they don't have your specific qualities that the avoidant connected with. The comparison trap keeps the avoidant stuck because they're measuring everyone against you while simultaneously being too defended to come back to you. They date other people, but think about you during dates. They pursue new connections, but miss what they had with you. They tell themselves they're moving on, but they're actually just confirming that what they had with you was unique and rare. This recognition doesn't make them act less unbothered externally, but internally they're obsessed with what they lost and whether anyone else will ever come close. The comparison also includes the avoidant recognizing your specific value retrospectively. Qualities they took for granted when they had you become things they actively miss and seek in others. The way you communicated, the way you gave space while staying connected, the way you understood them without making them feel broken. They realize too late that these qualities were special, and the fact that they can't find them elsewhere makes their obsession with you deepen even as they maintain their unbothered exterior. They want to reach out but can't overcome the fear. The avoidant thinks about reaching out constantly. They compose messages they never send. They imagine conversations they never initiate. They want to tell you they miss you, that they made a mistake, that they wish things were different. But fear stops them every time. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear that you've moved on and reaching out would just confirm they lost their chance. So they remain silent while being obsessed with the idea of reconnecting. The paralysis around reaching out is torture for the avoidant because they're stuck between desire and defense. They want connection with you, but their nervous system treats vulnerability as dangerous. They want to show you they care, but expressing feelings feels like handing you power to hurt them. They want to repair what they damaged, but admitting they were wrong feels like acknowledging they're fundamentally broken. This internal conflict keeps them frozen, acting unbothered while internally being consumed with wanting to reach out but not being able to overcome their fears. The wanting to reach out also intensifies over time rather than fading. The longer the avoidant goes without contact, the more they think about you. The silence doesn't help them move on. It increases their obsession because they're wondering what you're doing, how you're feeling, whether you think about them. The unbothered act becomes harder to maintain internally even as they keep it up externally, and many avoidants eventually break and reach out impulsively when the internal pressure becomes too much to contain. Why the obsession doesn't lead to action? The tragedy of the avoidance obsession is that it rarely leads to meaningful action. They're obsessed, but also defended. They care intensely, but can't express it. They want you, but can't pursue you properly. This is because their attachment wounds are deeper than their feelings for you. No matter how much they care, their fear of vulnerability, of being hurt, of losing themselves in relationship is stronger than their desire for connection. The obsession is real, but the barriers to acting on it are also real. The lack of action also comes from the avoidant's hope that they can have you without having to change. They're obsessed with you, but they're not obsessed with doing the work required to be different. They want you to accept them as they are, patterns and all. When it becomes clear that real relationship requires them to be vulnerable, consistent, emotionally available, things they're not capable of. Without significant work, they choose the safety of distance over the risk of trying and failing. The obsession continues but remains unexpressed because expression would require change they're not ready for. Understanding that the avoidant is obsessed but unable to act helps you stop waiting for them to suddenly show up differently. The obsession isn't enough. What matters is whether they're willing to do the work to heal their patterns so the obsession can actually translate into healthy relationship. Most avoidants stay stuck in obsessed but unbothered, thinking about you constantly while doing nothing about it. And recognizing this pattern helps you stop interpreting their unbothered act as indifference, and instead see it as the defense mechanism it is protecting them from feelings they're not equipped to handle. What their obsession means for you. Understanding that the avoidant is obsessed with you behind their unbothered facade should change how you interpret their behavior, but not necessarily how you respond to it. Knowing they care doesn't mean you should wait around for them to overcome their fears and show up properly. Knowing they're monitoring your life doesn't mean you should perform for their attention. Knowing they think about you constantly doesn't mean you should make yourself available for the minimal effort they're capable of giving. The obsession is real, but it doesn't translate into the kind of relationship you deserve. The knowledge that they're obsessed should actually empower you to move forward rather than keep you stuck hoping. If they're that obsessed, if they care that much, if you're that important to them, then they need to do the work to overcome their fears and patterns. The obsession without action is just another form of taking you for granted. They get to keep you in their mental and emotional space. They get to monitor your life and feel connected. They get to maintain the option of you, all without having to do the vulnerable work of actually showing up. Recognizing this dynamic helps you see that their obsession benefits them while costing you. You deserve someone whose obsession with you translates into consistent action. Someone who doesn't just think about you constantly, but shows up for you reliably. Someone whose care is visible in their behavior, not just existing in their hidden internal world. The avoidance obsession is real, but it's also insufficient. It doesn't meet your needs. It doesn't build relationship. It doesn't create the partnership you want. Understanding that the unbothered act hides obsession helps you stop taking their detachment personally, but it should also help you recognize that you need more than hidden feelings and distance monitoring. You need someone capable of expressing their obsession through vulnerable, consistent, present action. And until the avoidant can do that, their obsession doesn't change anything about whether you should move on and find someone who can actually show you they care.